Sparta's Lost Fleet. Preface. This is a work of fiction. During 451 BC, Sparta and Athens signed a truce so the Delian League could focus on pushing back the Persians from Cyprus. It is said fleets sailed out with allies from other city-states to conduct joint exercises against future Persian invasions. During this time of peace is when I chose to tell the tale of Sparta's lost fleet. When crafting a tale as epic as this one, I've decided to use both obscure historical terms and common ones. To be blunt, the book is not written in ancient Greek, it's written in modern-day English. Captain and Company, or Lakagos and Logos. When I can, I shall try my best to bring the terms and sense of the time to the forefront. However, a lot of the words in this text are meant for enjoyment, not historical renditions. Finally, ancient Greece was brutal. The world of Drakor is even more brutal in some ways. I want to write a story that is as raw as those times. I'd rather tell a stirring tale that is real to the world it is set in than a dry historical tome. With that said, there won't be scenes of rape or extended torture in detail. This is a book set in ancient Greece with characters who worship Hellenism and the ancient Greek myths. There will be blood, battles, orgies, slavery, misogyny, and once the main characters get to their fantasy world, some misandry as well. Basically, this story does not align with any religious views outside of the pantheon of the Greek gods. These are not my views on a personal level. I've written stories with characters who are socialists, fascists, communists, Democrats, Republicans, tribalists, and on it goes. I'm a storyteller, not a politician or a religious figure. Now, turn the page or Zeus will smite you. Still haven't turned the page? Maybe I'll tell Aphrodite to stop visiting your dreams. Hurry, before it's too late. Premise. On a distant fantasy world, 9 alien species enslave humanity. Those humans pray to the forbidden gods, or the Hellenistic gods. Poseidon, god of the seas, shifts 6 vessels and 1,000 stout Greek warriors to show the 9 species that not only are the Hellenic gods real, but that humanity is not meek. The story will have multiple POVs to follow, not too different from Game of Thrones. There are twists, turns, violence, and graphic scenes. No harems, and the explicit content is not the driving point of the story. And yes, Greek soldiers were gay or bisexual in high numbers. So the story flows from battle to battle with some POVs with locals who suddenly realize how dangerous humans can be. Eventually, the Spartans and their freed people create a home, a defensive point to fend off their enemies. Chapter 1. Cape Malea. The hairs on his arm arose from the faintest of cries drifting on the wind. Aros's steely gaze shifted across the ship's deck, hunting for the mysterious whisperings. A few steps to the trireme's edge allowed him to stare down into the sea's brooding depths. Nothing stirred, so he stood upon his toes to check the rest of the small fleet. 6 ships nestled together, a few hundred paces apart. Only leagues away, the shore continued to be boringly quiet. Only 3 triremes displayed the lambda, which wasn't a surprise. The might of Sparta was never known for its naval prowess, a fact the Gerousia wanted to change with half measures. In Aros's opinion, the old scholars needed to heed the advice of the younger generation more often. Sparta shouldn't surrender the sea to the Delian League. The might of their people demanded excellence, and a subpar trade meant fewer resources to help the war efforts. Because of Aros's unpopular opinions, politics troubled him and his advice mostly fell upon deaf ears, the exception being this exercise. All 6 of the ships, both Athenian and Spartan, showed no sign of special activity that might reveal why he heard a cry, and yet he trusted his instincts. Right now, a tingling screamed at him to face the hidden foe. When a second cry whispered into his ear, he bounded across the deck with an aggressive skid to keep from falling over. "Strategos?" Eglos asked. Aros's second-in-command barked out the question with a single word, knowing to trust his commander. The man's stern gaze matched his concerned tone. Pericles snorted, folding his tanned arms over a light leather jerkin. "Acting strategos," The Athenian captain didn't try to hide his resentment. The recent peace between their people hardly healed old wounds. "You fearless Spartans, so scared of a little storm." Aros glanced up towards the skiff with a small sail heading for the shore. The blasted Athenian was correct. He was only an acting strategos because Acreus fled. Even though his superior officer would eventually be scolded for leaving the joint training exercise, the Athenian's point stung as much as lashes across one's back. Aros said, "Strategos Acreos knows land should be beneath his feet. My brother teases me. Since you missed the cue, let me explain. This is my Mora, which consists of 3 logos or companies. I am their polemarch, or commander." Aros continued to watch the water, trying to find the source of the whispered warning. "I don't expect you to understand our ways, but I'll let you know I don't have any such inclinations toward leaving the fleet like our former overseer. These men are hardened, tested, and exceptionally skilled. Training will resume once the storm passes." Theracles' piercing blue eyes judged him with daring inclinations. Aros could see him calculating if he was about to be attacked. He wisely kept his mouth shut at this point, fearing the Spartan's inclinations to use a fight to end an argument. "And your concern?" Iglos asked. Iglos stood half a head shorter than Aros, with a fresh scab ready to transition into a scar over his forehead. During the war, an Athenian Chiphos dug under his helm and cut his skull. He barely survived the grievous injury and now found himself side by side with his previous foe. The unit didn't love that the kings had settled a fragile peace between the factions. The warriors on the field who were dying, well, they wanted to crush their foes, not join them months later for naval training. Aros stopped his pacing, flustered that the signals warned him, but he couldn't find the source of the warnings. He noticed Iglos watching intently, understanding his commander's mannerisms. The heavily armored hoplite was a brother to him, a kindred soul who braved the agoge at his side. If there was ever a man who could read his mind, it was Iglos. To Aros and his unit, they'd always rather be on edge and stand down from a fight than be caught off guard. "Signal and alert. Don helms," Aros commanded. No explanation was given, nor was one needed. A polemarch's orders were to be obeyed without question. The Spartan society lived and died by its ways, and when it came to combat, a leader's orders instantly became law. "Over a storm?" Theracles said snidely. Even though he doubted the situation was dire, the Athenian did scan the horizon. Aros shook his head at the sailor. The only reason he was on their ship was to coordinate their collaboration after Acreus' departure. He flippantly gestured to the brewing horizon after not finding any threats. "We're fine." A salpinx blared from Charitmus, a Pirioisi who'd sound signals as well as play music during evening meals. Across the wooden decks of the 3 ships, every Spartan stomped in unison. "Roo! Ha!" The reverberated grunt in perfect unison spoke of Spartan discipline. It told any foes who neared steel would be exchanged before words. Aros ignored Theracles, sliding a strap over his forehead until his bangs became pinned to his head. The cold bronze sunk into place, with the headband being the only padding. With his helm secured, Aros transitioned from a man and turned into a monster of war. The Spartan soldiers on all the ships transformed from casual stances to tensed for war in less than a minute. He grabbed his dory from a nearby leaning position and paced the ship's edge. Aros's eyes sought what his instincts told him existed, something dangerous. He hunted, coming up empty. To sate Theracles' apprehension, Iglos said, "Aros is the finest of Spartans, and was selected to lead this mission. Acreus' pull with the council landed him the position as overseer, but these men answer to our polemarch. Some say Aros is the reason for the peace. He slipped into Athens after the agoge, studied your ways, and then crushed your armies in 7 engagements." "I know who he is. None of those battles will ring through history because they only stalled our capabilities," the Athenian captain said. "Defeating ill-trained reaction troops shouldn't be applauded." Aros wanted to sneer, but his studies in diplomacy kept his face stoic. Theracles' words were meant to jab at his sense of honor and elicit a response. A part of him believed factions wanted the Spartans to kill these sailors and renew the war since the Persians failed to marshal as predicted. Aros decided to trust in Theracles' skill as a sailor, instead of scolding his harsh words. The gods warned me. It was only a shrill cry, like a woman's anger when she's gone mad. No louder than a whisper. By the gods, can I not catch a break? Omens are normally ignored. A battle-hardened Spartan on edge from sirens is worth getting the men in armor. I suppose. I'll return to my on the horizon. Motion cut his words off mid-sentence. A massive gout of water surged into the air near the skiff where Acreus fled the coming storm. The small boat rocked violently from the disturbance. Within the small boat's hull, a half-dozen soldiers fought to stabilize the rocking. Strategos Acreus sprung to his feet with his plumed helm instantly differentiating him. The aged Spartan pointed to the water while shouting words that failed to reach Aros's ears. A violent churning around the skiff suddenly calmed. The small boat sat low in the water, and while the fleet watched, the Athenians hurried to prepare for battle. Aros expected fish to jump from predation below, or for a whale to surface to explain the torrent of water that rose so high that it still showered down. Instead, an aquatic monster with long claws for hands and webbed flippers breached the surface. The single creature flew right into awaiting hoplites, becoming impaled before it could crash onto the deck. A shrill shriek escaped the monster's throat, triggering a reaction from the swarm underneath. Aros watched in muted shock as dozens of the creatures scaled the wooden hull of the skiff. The weight of the swarm dragged the skiff down until water swamped the interior. Dories from the sinking Spartans sped out, earning kill after kill with their sharp tips punching through flesh with ease. The fierce warriors fought even as the ocean swallowed their vessel. Their efforts were in vain once the water level cracked the skiff's hull at the midriff. In a matter of seconds, all that remained in the area were 2 floating oars bobbing on the churning sea from the coming storm. You have my apologies, Aros, Theracles muttered. Aros snorted with an amused grin. He cupped his mouth and shouted, Scan the hulls! Keep them from ascending! Tuck oars! Brace for battle! We are one in this fight! Together, we will send these abominations to Hades!